Hello there, and welcome to the ECPC TV stage for day 2 of ICCC. This is Brown Leader from Hyperspace Heroes podcast. I've got a host with me, co-host with me, Matt from Yubcast, also known as Brown 7 on our show. Welcome, Matt.
Thanks. This is Matt from Yubcast.
Do you do that like? Does he do that every single time? Welcome, Matt.
Yeah,
Like every single time.
it's a big walk-in.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
walk-in.
That's nice.
Nice. And we've got a special guest with us here on the ECPC TV stage today, a regular to the ICCC Convention Con, Mr. Guy Gilchrist. Welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. So how's the convention going so far for you?
Well, I don't have to hear "Welcome, Matt" every half hour. So it's always it's always grand, and Nashville's been my hometown now for like 17 years. And this is, the only show that I do in Nashville, and I love the size of it. It's really, really nice. You get a chance to, you really hang out with people, and Michael and Philip, everybody involved are just wonderful.
Yeah, that is definitely one of the things I appreciate about this con. We drive like 10 hours from northern Michigan to come to this every year because we just love the intimate setting. And just how approachable everybody is.
Well, it's not like I don't love the big ones. I do all the fan expos in L.A. and New York City Comic Con, and each place has its own vibe. And but I like the vibe here.
Right on.
And plus, it's nice that I go home every night.
Yeah,
it's the only con that I go home every night.
Right, nice easy drive.
Yeah.
Matt, you want to go ahead and lead off?
Yeah, being local's got to be a great benefit. I also drove from about 12 hours away.
Gosh.
But I only crossed 2 states. I crossed Virginia, the longest way you could possibly cross Virginia, and then Tennessee, the longest way you could possibly cross Tennessee.
I know that route because I'm originally from Connecticut, so I used to drive down 84 to 81 to 40 and yeah.
Well, I know we should get right into it. So I know you did you're the cartoonist for the strip, for the Muppets.
That's right.
And when did
it was called the Muppets comic strip.
Muppets comic strip.
Jim Henson's Muppets.
Very simple name. Very, very to the point.
Well, it made sense. We didn't want to call it Thundercats.
That would have been confusing.
Yeah.
A little bit. So how did you get into working with Jim on the comic strip?
Well, it's a really, really, really long story. And I've never told it before. But anyway, Jim had been looking for someone for about 2 years. I had no idea. Jim had decided in around like 77, 78, that he knew that at some point, these beloved characters, he wasn't going to be doing the weekly show anymore. There were a lot of things on his plate that he wanted to do. But back in the 70s and 80s, one of the biggest things in the world that you could ever have is a comic strip and newspapers, because it was being read, especially if it was pretty much in every newspaper in the entire world, which if Jim wanted to do a strip, that's how it was going to be. So he started looking for somebody. I had no idea about any of this stuff. I was working for Weekly Reader. I had done some work for Disney and things. I was a relatively unknown person. And then I got a chance to audition in 1980. And I was a huge fan of the Muppets. And so they kept asking. King Features was the syndicate, and they kept asking for more jokes, for me to do more for a couple of weeks. And so I kept doing it. And then they invited me to go over I got invited to go over to the Muppets headquarters, which is at 117 East 69th Street, a block off of Park. The brownstone, the famous brownstone. And I had a meeting with Michael Frith, who eventually became my boss. I walked out of this incredibly opulent and silly place. It was like the coolest place in the whole world. And I turned to my brother, who I had hired, and I said, I'm going to work here. And, and that was it. Well, because they hadn't given me any. Anyway, my audition wound up lasting 10 months.
Yikes.
And the reason, but it was all on me. They had liked me, but no one gave me the job. I said I was going to get the job. So I just figured until somebody said that I didn't have the job, I was going to do the job. So I was working for Weekly Reader doing comic book, but pretty much every night I would just write new jokes. I'd mail them in for free. And eventually, like I said, like 10 months from that initial call, I got a phone call from Jerry Jewell, Jim's head writer, and he starts talking about this gag with Gonzo and some earthworms that we're going to call the Wormettes, and they're going to be the chorus girls that are going to fall down because they only have one leg, right? You know, because they're worms. Okay, and I'm like, Mr. Jewell, like Juhl, like on the crawl at the end of the. He's like, you rube, I'm a big Hollywood writer. I don't have time for this. You know, and he's like spoofing me already. I'm like, Mr. Jewell, why are you calling me? He says, well, didn't Michael call you? I said, no. He says, well, Jim hired you a month ago. That's how I found out. And then a month later, I met Jim. And, you know, he was a magical person. I've had a really blessed life. You know, Chuck Jones, Chris Freeling. I mean, I've worked with some amazing people, but Jim is singularly the most wonderful, and he changed my perceptions of everything, and it was wonderful to work for him for that decade before he left.
Great.
Keep going.
I mean, you brought up your brother, and you two were writing pair, right?
Hmm?
You brought up your brother,
Yeah, Brad.
and you two wrote together on.
Well, he didn't sit on my lap. You know, we were in separate rooms usually, you know.
Well, that
But yeah, no, we did write together. Yeah, I brought Brad initially on to work on the Sunday Color and things like that, and to assist me that way. And I found out that he had a good gag. You know, he the more he wrote daily gags, the better he got. Because there's a certain bump that you have to have.
right.
And I'm more of a story guy, and also I'm a very visual gag guy. And he had a good way with a dialogue as well. So so eventually, you know, Brad was writing a good, like, third to sometimes even a half of the strips that were being done. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That was for the Muppets and for Nancy?
For Nancy, Brad was writing the majority of Nancy for about the first 5 years. Then we split it up. I was writing, but we were doing 50-50. I did it for 23 years.
Right.
Sometime around the 12th or 13th year, Brad, left to do another strip, and I wound up writing it. So the last 10 years. Yeah, Brad's a good writer, very good writer.
Okay.
Very cool. You had mentioned that after meeting Jim, he changed your perspective on things. How so? What was your perspective beforehand, and then?
Well,
what
give
was
me
Jim's
okay.
impact?
Okay. Name any subject, like a philosophy, a religion, some sort of a cultural thing, art. You name it, and then I'll tell you what the change was, because that's too general.
Well, I'm just kind of going based on what you had said about he had changed your perspective on, was it on like the cartoons, the comic strips?
Okay. Yeah, well, definitely that. Because when I met Jim, so I was drawing, and Michael Frith, who is like the greatest guy in the world and this incredible genius. And if you don't know who Michael K. Frith is, you should really look him up, because most of the characters that you know, that you love, of the Muppets, Michael created them along with Jim. Michael was Jim when Jim wasn't in New York, and then when Jim was in New York, all Michael had to do was be Michael, which is still 100 times what anybody else should ever have to do. His incredible genius. But anyway, so when Jim and I started talking, Jim said, remember, I hadn't worked for like Disney, Warner Brothers, and this and that, but I was always channeling Chuck Jones or Frisch Freeling or Freddie Moore or whoever it was. Remember, I'm going 2 dimensions, and then I'm recreating that style. Well, the Muppets are real.
Right.
They're real. They're 3-dimensional characters. There's magic. There's color. There's the voices. There's the music. There's all of that movement. And now I'm going to be drawing a black and white box. And so Jim said to me, the first thing he said was, you know, some of these drawings are really good. And some of these drawings are even great. But we don't want really good and we don't want great. We want wonderful. And there I am like a deer in the headlights, you know, like, whoa, what wonderful. How do I draw wonderful? Like, you know, I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing? What am I doing? What am I doing? You idiot, you idiot. You know, like, you know, this Chris Farley thing. Boom, boom, boom. But it's all going on in my head. And meanwhile, I'm just there like this, you know. And this really works on podcast radio. But anyway, I think you guys listening get the idea. But then Jim just lifted his right hand and introduced me to Kermit. You know, there was no puppet on his hand. He just introduced me to him. And as he would go through, you know, doing his thing, I realized what he meant. Like immediately, this is how Jim taught you things and how it changed perspective. Jim didn't tell you anything. He would say something. He didn't tell you how to do anything. He had this respect for you that you would think, like, I like you, I think you're smart, without ever saying that. So I was realizing that life was coming through that felt. And all of those things that I said about the magic. What he meant was I had to find a way to pretend that so that I could put so much life into my drawing that you would forget that it was flat and black and white and only color on Sunday. And that's what I've been doing for 40 some odd years. You know, Jim left a long time ago now. And I moved on to, you know, MGM and everyone else, Warner Brothers. But I always went in with the same thing, draw wonderfully, you know. And Jim was the greatest boss because he would hire you once he felt like, you know, and I told you I worked a lot, I drew a lot and wrote a lot. Well, he figured I was probably going to be good at this since I was doing it already. But then he gave me this incredible trust. Remember, this is the biggest show in the whole world. And he just gave it to me. And that's scary. Mm-hmm. But him having that trust in you, you just didn't want to mess up. So what's interesting when you have a boss, you've all had bosses that have micromanaged you, and you feel like they feel like you're stupid. Well, Jim was the opposite. He'd give you the job and not tell you anything. He might, you know, push you a little here or there, you know, in some direction. Well, you know, why don't you walk through that door instead of down that manhole? But if you think there's something interesting in the manhole, maybe, you know. It was that sort of thing where he would just sort of give you the job and you understood the trust involved. And so I would wind up looking at everything, not from one direction, but from every direction that there could possibly be, so that whatever I wound up doing for him was the very, very best that I could do. And I had figured it out. So I jumped through every hoop, but I created every hoop myself.
When you talk about drawing wonderfully, and when you learned how to do that,
I don't know if I'm still there. I'm working on it. I really do. I try real hard.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked with a lot of animators and a lot of comic book artists, and one of them told me once that you know a character is good when you recognize them with the least amount of information present, like silhouette or just a line.
Silhouette, yeah.
Right, and so
that's a very true thing.
You don't mistake Mickey Mouse for Bart Simpson because in silhouette you recognize them immediately.
Yeah, that's great character design.
Yeah.
If you think of any character, even when you look at the characters like that are very, very similar in silhouette, okay, from the side profile, like Flash Gordon and Superman, they both have a curl, and it's the same exact thing, right? But the back of their hair is different.
Yeah.
There's always something. In any character that lasts, there's always something. And every single Muppet looks different. You know, the design, that's something that you learn as a designer. Your character is going to stand out. Mm-hmm.
And so it was drawing wonderfully, adding emotion to those minimal silhouettes. And
no. What I mean is, so he's a puppet. And he's made out of felt. And if you just draw the puppet, okay, exactly like he is, with his eyes exactly what they are as a puppet, you have to remember that it's going to be really small. And there's no movement happening. Everything is static. So how do we animate in still photos? Well, for me, it was, oh, I'll make the eyes bigger. Oh, I can do this. Oh, I can slide it this way. I was animating in my mind and trying to stretch a puppet without actually stretching the puppet. Like, for you to still think you were looking at Miss Piggy, but I was animating her in still pictures. She was doing things in my drawings that she could not actually do, you know, as Piggy, the puppet.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. Well, Guy, we appreciate you coming up today and spending some time with us. I know you've got a busy appearance here at the con, and we really enjoyed talking with you. Where can folks find you in the convention area?
Oh, okay. I thought you wanted me to like give out my address. Yeah. Anyway, we'll come to the back wall, and so there'll be like a lot of people that you've heard of that are in Star Wars movies. There's like these two really pretty girls that are right next to me, and but then you'll see a Muppet Theater. And you'll see Rolf, you know, Rolf will be there. I'll tell you what, kids, I was big in the 60s. You know, now that Disney bought us, I live in a box. But I'm telling you what, once upon a time. So you'll see, you know, my little green boss. So my little green boss is there, Rolf is there, I'm there, and come and say hi and visit us. And it's always really lovely to be here, and you guys always treat me wonderfully. Mike and all of you guys are all great, and thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, thank you, guys. So, yeah, definitely if you're in that Nashville area this weekend, swing on into ICCC, check out Guy, look for the Muppet Theater on the back wall when you walk into the convention area. And
It's really hard to find.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. That's why we didn't name it Thundercats.
Right, exactly.
That would have
That's a
been
good wrap-up.
confusing.
Right. So, yeah, thank you for coming here, and make sure to stay tuned for more podcasts here on the ECPC TV stage and events.
Okay,
going on
everybody.
at
Okay,
ICCC.
we have a. You guys know that we have an audience, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So, all right, as loud as you can. We're finishing this off. Ready? And there's not a lot of people. There's not like 100,000 people here. Don't blow this. Okay? You know this. Ready? Here we go. Phenomena. Phenomena. All right. Let's start over because that first part was weak. Ready? And a 1 and a 2 and a 6 foot hike. Phenomena. 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 That was great. Love you guys.
Thanks, Guy.